Hello dear crypto friends, and welcome to this video in which obviously we are going to take a look at this latest Bitcoin dump, because what is happening, it's happening as I had feared, that 20,100 was not the low and that indeed we are dropping lower. But how low is this psycho going to drop, right? That is what we want to find out in this video. We have the long-term Bitcoin chart. The long-term weekly chart is always a nice starting point to understand the long-term structure of Bitcoin. And we see that we are approaching the lower green support line that has been touched a few times in Bitcoin's history, in 2011, then in 2012, then almost in late 2012 again, then in August 2015, and then in March 2020. So quite a few times this support line here has been touched, and it's a curved trend line because this logarithmic regression channel is of course a curved channel, and it is currently, I think, one of the best models we have in order to model the long-term price behavior of Bitcoin. So as we know, the moving average 200 of 200 weeks, here drawn in blue, which always has acted as pretty good support, has been broken through like it's not even there. And now we are approaching the weekly moving average 290 weeks, which has been touched once in March 2020 and would have been touched in August 2015 if it had existed. It's represented by this light blue line here. So we see that right now it is looking as if this thing was not going to stop anytime soon, because we have no bounce whatsoever. If we move to the daily chart, there's no sign of bouncing whatsoever. We look at the volume, we see that still the buying volume has not managed to surpass the selling volume. The red bars are always larger than the green bars, which is of course not nice. We go into the 4-hour chart, we see that only very recently has this thing started to drop further, and only once did we have nice buying volume on June the 15th, where it looked as if it was bouncing. But I already said 2 days ago that this is not looking like an impressive bounce because the bounce magnitude is not really high. And also the buying volume, yes, it was higher than here, but immediately afterwards we got again much more selling volume than buying volume, which is of course not a good sign. And lo and behold, indeed, we are now breaking lower. Now the volume candle in the weekly chart, at least some good news, is extremely high. We have now Saturday. So if this continues, of course, we could be looking at a volume similar to May 2021, and with a bit of luck, even similar to March 2020, although it will be of course hard to achieve that until the weekly candle close Sunday night. Looking at the weekly RSI, it is of course freaking insane. We are making super lows. I mean, this is ridiculous. Look at this. The RSI is now at 25. The previous record low in January 2015 has been at 28.2. We are now at 25.29. This is like a new record low. Now I still maintain my view that the moving average 290 is the most likely target, which has been hit here in March 2020 and would have been hit in August 2015. I think this is a super solid support, and I still think the likelihood is pretty high that we will hit this support level. So that is for me the highest likelihood scenario for the low. But of course, if we look at the long-term chart, as I said, here this lower green line represents the ultra solid support, and it has been touched a few times, for example here in 2011 and 2012. So it's not excludable that we are going to touch that support line, which now currently rests at 15,000. Now if we go into the monthly chart, the monthly is a very good time to get a really big overall picture, right? The monthly chart, like monthly candles, represent like a real big picture kind of situation. And if we look at the monthly RSI, friends, we see that even in the monthly RSI, we are also making new lows. So record after record, but it just continues dropping like a stone. We are now at 41 monthly RSI. Previous record was 43.9 in late 2018, early 2019. Now in the monthly, if we deactivate now the long-term trend channel, there's something very nice. There's a good indicator which I want to show you, which is the Bollinger Band. The monthly Bollinger Band normally gives us some pretty nice clues what is going to happen, right? So when the monthly Bollinger Band was very narrow, as for example happened in mid-2016, then the likelihood for a breakout is very high, because if the Bollinger Band becomes very narrow, that just tells us that the likelihood for a breakout either to the upside or to the downside is getting very high. And this is exactly what happened in mid-2016. But then of course we also had a similar situation in 2020, right? In 2020 the Bollinger Band was getting insanely narrow. Here in October 2020 it was one of the narrowest it has ever been. So the likelihood for a break to the up or downside was getting very high. And since both these narrowings occurred at a time when Bitcoin was seeing the halvings, that of course increased the likelihood that we would see a break to the upside and not to the downside. Now what is happening for the first time in Bitcoin's entire history is that we are actually going to touch, or almost touching right now, the lower monthly Bollinger Band. If you look at it historically, it has never happened before. Bitcoin has never touched the lower monthly Bollinger Band. It has come close in the March 2020 low. If we look at it, let us zoom in, we see it has come pretty close here. The lower monthly band was not far away, but we have never ever reached the lower monthly Bollinger Band, friends. That is a new situation we have. And let us zoom in right now, and we see that the lower monthly Bollinger Band is now at 18,300. Okay, so what I think happens is the monthly Bollinger Band should provide solid support. So even though we could break through the monthly Bollinger Band, this will act as super support and we will bounce upside very strongly. I don't see a situation where now we just go through the monthly Bollinger Band, the lower monthly Bollinger Band, and just linger there and just continue dumping like this. I don't really see a situation like this happening. In my opinion, it is super likely that now we go through the monthly Bollinger Band to about 15,000. I always said, and I just keep reiterating, that I think 13,000 is the lowest possible low, in my opinion, that can occur in this dump. I don't see Bitcoin going to 8,000, 5,000 or numbers like these. People, in my opinion, always tend to exaggerate. When the sentiment is super bad, we exaggerate to the downside. When the sentiment is super good and bullish, we exaggerate to the upside. Remember 1 year ago when Plan B's targets of $300,000 per Bitcoin were still floating around? Yeah. And now there are targets like $3,000 and $5,000 floating around. But we must stay realistic and look at the data. And the monthly Bollinger Band tells us that it is extremely unlikely that we are going below, say, 13 or 14,000 as the most extreme scenarios. And as I said in the weekly chart, we just look at the moving average 290, which has acted as ultra solid support and has been touched perfectly in March 2020. For me, it still represents the highest likelihood target, and the second highest likelihood target is the lower band of this long-term logarithmic trend channel here, which has been respected time and time again. So the second likeliest target, in my opinion, is now exactly at 15,000, and the third likeliest target is even a bit below 15,000. As we said, the lower monthly Bollinger Band could be broken through and then we immediately bounce because it is super ultra solid support. So the most brutal target for me is about 13,000. We could now move very fast towards 14, 15, 13,000, this area, and then we would get an epic bounce. Now what will happen afterwards, of course, is very interesting. It might be akin to that situation here in 2015, where we actually went down here in January 2015 and then we had this double peak pattern and then another bounce. Could this happen again? Of course it could happen again. There's nothing saying that it cannot happen. So we could get a peak and then another peak and then we bounce again down and then afterwards the rally is resumed, right? But of course also we could get a V-shaped recovery and then we just continue creeping upwards. And then we know that in 2024 there is already the next halving, and we see that this is actually not so far away anymore. I think March to May. So we could creep upwards, go down a bit, and then in 2024 get the next cycle, something like that. But of course, foreseeing this, what Bitcoin will do in the next 1 to 2 years, does not only depend on the halving, because the halving has less and less impact. More and more coins are already on the market, and the influence thus of mining and the selling pressure from mining will be reduced more and more. So the halving will play less and less of a role each halving cycle into the future. So in yesterday's video I said that actually the macroeconomic situation in Ukraine and other economic developments worldwide will play a much bigger role, because these things influence the behavior of stocks, of US government bond yields, and of the dollar index, right? These things influence the behavior of the stock market and of the dollar index much more. So these are the things we have to look out for. So foreseeing exactly how this will play out, like, oh sure, this will now bounce and we go immediately into a rally, or yeah, sure, this will bounce and then we get a double peak structure and then rally, or yeah, this will now be a protracted bear market and then we go into a bull market in 2024. Foreseeing this, friends, is absolutely, utterly impossible. We can just make best guesses, but ultimately this will be fully decided by macroeconomic events, which, as we know, are completely unforeseeable. No one could have foreseen COVID happening exactly at the time when it happened. No one could have foreseen Ukraine happening exactly at the time when it happened. So these are like black swan events that, bam, they pop out of a sudden and they change the whole macroeconomic picture. So that has, of course, a huge influence then on the Bitcoin price. So how exactly the bottom will look, we cannot say. But what we can say now with this long-term chart and with the monthly Bollinger Band, as I showed you before, is that the highest likelihood low is between 13,000, and take 13,000 as the most extreme case, and 17,000, the weekly moving average 290, which remains for me the most likely case. So between 13 and 17,000 is the low for me in this bear market here. And how we will recover, of course, I will monitor the situation on a daily basis, and then we can hopefully see how exactly Bitcoin will recover and when exactly Bitcoin will go into a new rally. We will use the RSI, we'll use the volume, we will use many indicators and compare always to the stock market, to the dollar index, and to the macroeconomic picture. If you found this video interesting, friends, please like and subscribe. I would be happy to welcome you on this small but growing channel. So then, don't despair. These situations are the best situations to buy up cheap coins. I'm certainly buying cheap coins, you can believe me. But of course, always do your own research before investing and never invest more than you can afford to lose. Have a nice day, friends, and see you in the next update video tomorrow. Bye!